Hey everyone, Phobos here, coming at you with another discussion video, and this time it's going to be for Destiny 2, specifically the PvP, and we're going to be talking about basically what's wrong with PvP in Destiny 2. And there's been a lot of criticism for Destiny 2 lately. It actually started, I would say, even a couple weeks or maybe even a week after the game launched. A lot of it has been PvE focused, but there's also been a fair amount of PvP criticism. I mostly play for PvP and play the game for PvP, so I'm going to be doing a video on that first. Might do a PvE video, but basically I'm just going to go through and list all the things that I think are kind of wrong with Destiny 2, and then I'm going to talk about a bit about the expansion that's going to be coming in a couple days and how that might be able to fix some of the problems, but likely not. So I guess without any further ado, I got the little step here. I'll just start to go through things. Some of these might bleed into each other a bit, but just to be expected a little bit. So the first thing is obviously the higher time to kill and like how this basically penalizes skilled players, right? So obviously it seems like there's been a lot of changes in the game, not just like the higher time to kill, that have sort of aimed at restricting what a good player can do against lesser skilled players, what a higher skilled player can do. And obviously, I'm just completely against that. I think anybody who is striving for a more competitive environment should be against that full bore, right? Like, why would you ever want to restrict somebody's impact on the game? It just doesn't make any sense to me, honestly. Um, I just really can't even. It sounds like such a simple point to address, but it doesn't make any sense to me from any sort of perspective, unless your perspective is just that like you deserve to be rewarded for being less skilled or something. But that's a really weird perspective to have. I just can't understand why that'd be in the game. I mean, so the rationale why they obviously do this is they want people who are on the lower end of the spectrum to be able to compete with people on the higher end, I guess. I think because typically in these types of games, like when you're winning games or like when you're ranking up or something like that, it's like there's like a feel good component there, and that makes people want to continue playing, right? If somebody's playing and they're just getting stomped all the time, there's probably a greater chance they leave the game. And obviously, the company doesn't want that because they want them staying in the game, buying the loot boxes, whatever. I feel like Overwatch is very similar to this, and how like a lot of the low skill heroes actually have very high amounts of impact in the game. And I think that the game was almost intentionally designed like that, so that players on the lower end can sort of like climb the ladder with some amount of consistency. They don't just kind of hit a wall, And that's why we see all these like support mains or whatever in the top 500, and I made a video about that a little bit ago. But yeah, so I think that's what's going on here. And the argument that they always give, of course, is that what they want to do in reality is that they want to just promote team play, right? Oh, team play is this fantastic thing, and everybody likes teamwork, right? Teamwork's so great. Yay, teamwork, I help you, you help me. And we do this together, we get a bigger sense of accomplishment for doing it, all this like party line ridiculous stuff. And it's just like very laughable to me because if you were to like make the game a more skilled game, not just lowering the time to kills, but just across the board make changes to make the game so that if you have a higher individual player skill, you can be more impactful on the game. It doesn't really take away from the team play aspect as much, right? Like team play is always going to be important in a game that has a team, right? Like if you like, I would look at it like this: there's four slots in this game for teammates, but in League or something there'd be five. Overwatch there'd be six. So each slot you have, there's like potential to be filled, right? And if you have like an amazing player, one out of your four people in Destiny 2 is an amazing player that can like carry games and stuff. That's amazing, right? But that's still only 1/4 of your whole team. So just think about if that person's going up against a team of four all-star players. You know what I mean? They should lose all the time. Like this one player isn't going to be able to carry to that degree. Like he's not going to be able to carry over players that are also insanely good necessarily, because they're going to have the same chances and the same opportunities to carry their team. So like I just don't understand like what's the negative of allowing somebody to hit their full potential and potentially carry the game. You know what I mean? It's kind of like ridiculous to me that they're trying to put an artificial ceiling on people's skill level, and I think it just makes it unfun for those players, right? They just don't want to play a game where they can be killed by somebody, or they can be impeded so heavily by somebody who's like much lower skill than them. I don't blame them. I don't understand why they would want to play a game like that. Like, I don't want to play a game like that. So yeah, it's just really weird because team play is always going to exist, right? Like if you have a great player, what's better than a great player? Well, a great player with great tactics or a great team around him. You know what I mean? So there's no lack of team play in a game that rewards individual skill. You know what I mean? Like being individual skill can only be a boon on the team, but it doesn't take away from any team play aspect, right? It just makes the team play, it can be like somewhat less relevant in a game where the skill level, there's varying skill levels, right? In terms of base performance. So, yeah, that's just like mind-boggling to me. The second point is 3 and 4 stacks. So this is basically to do with the queuing system, and how queuing works is apparently like it just queues you. I don't know if it's random or something like that, or I don't know exactly how the algorithm works, obviously. But what ends up happening in this game is that a fair portion of the time, I'd say at least like 2 out of 10, 3 out of 10 times, you're getting matched with like a 3 or a 4 stack. That's probably a 4 stack. Like honestly, it's probably more closer to almost half the time you're getting matched with like some type of 3 to 4 stack on the enemy team. But even let's be conservative and say it's like 2 to 3 out of 10 or something. It's just like a really frustrating experience because the 4 stacks and stuff tend to play together, obviously, like much better than a pug team would. So even if your team is not really that good, just by virtue of sticking together with where you are on the map, it's a lot easier to kill people in this game because of the higher time to kills, and it just allows, like, the team shot meta is a big thing. It just allows people to basically get team shot down, and in my opinion, the weird part about it, right, is like there's no solo queue or anything, and we're allowing 4 stacks to queue into basically like teams of solo players. So it's like not only can you impact the game less than Destiny 2 as an individual player, but you're actually being put up against full teams in some cases, right? Like you would think that if they were trying to make this like such a squad-based game, they would have much stricter rules for the matching algorithm in terms of if it's matching you up against 3 or 4 people, right? If you have a team of 3 or 4 people, and yeah, it doesn't make any sense at all because, like I said, there's the component of you being able to exert less impact on the game as a solo player, and then it's matching you into a situation where you're almost like predestined to lose. And it's just really frustrating because if you go the other route and you become the 4 stack, then you match into a lot of these solo players or like small groups and you just basically roll them over. So it's like, do you either want to like steamroll all your games and literally have like a 90-some 100% win rate when you play with certain people from your friends list that are good? Or do you want to play solo and have maybe some competitive games, but then just have some games where you have absolutely no chance at all because you're queuing into a 4 stack of players that's really good? It just doesn't make any sense. This is why I think the game needs some type of solo queue, and that's kind of basically point number 3, where there's no ranked playlist or competitive ladder. So there's a competitive, right now there's 2 playlists, right? There's quick play and there's competitive. Now competitive is really no different from quick play aside from the types of game types, or the game types that are in the playlist, right? So quick play has supremacy, control, and clash, and then competitive has countdown and survival. And there's no like reward difference or anything like that. It's just that countdown and survival are arbitrarily chosen by Bungie to be the more competitive game types, I suppose, and hence they are put in the competitive playlist. But there's no ranked ladder. There seems to be like very scarce matchmaking. Like the matchmaking in this game is absolutely abysmal if it even does exist. Because in this game, what's interesting is it would have an even easier time of providing good matchmaking because you don't get like since it's not a free to play game and this game is actually quite expensive. Um, you get nowhere near the amount of issues in terms of like the amount of Smurfs you'd get in this game versus a game like League of Legends, where at League of Legends, like anybody can create a new account anytime and they log on to the game and they're playing against noobs again, right? You can have like a master or challengers player do this. So that means that it's very difficult for them to figure out their matching algorithm because people are coming into the game with a master challenger skill level. They're going right into a fresh account and they're playing against new players. This game doesn't have that problem because if you want to do that, it costs like $100 to buy another copy of the game. So that's very restrictive and people aren't going to do that. So yeah, there's no reason why the matchmaking algorithm is like so bad as it is, and it definitely doesn't seem to match you in any type of reasonable MMR, and it definitely doesn't correspond to the MMRs on a site like Destiny Tracker or anything like that. So the matchmaking is just very bad on top of not having a ranked playlist, and that creates obviously a lot of problems for the game. And I think there's something to be said about the types of game types as well, because there's this inherent thought that I think a life restriction is what makes the game more competitive. And I just completely disagree about that because I don't really see what it adds to the game. It's almost like they tried to port Counter-Strike Global Offensive into into Destiny 2 for like in some arbitrary reason. I think the idea was that maybe they seen that CS:GO is the biggest FPS game right now, and they thought to take their game in a more competitive direction, they want to do something similar with the bomb plant mode, and then they were going to have another mode so that the gameplay didn't get stale, and that was basically just going to be team deathmatch but with lives, and it's just like really odd to me. I don't really understand why that would be put in this game, right? Like, because this is a certain style of FPS. I'd say it very much belongs in that like Halo genre in terms of PvP, right? And in the first game, there are lots of modes that like, or even in this game, there are modes that facilitate this, right? Like TDM is a classic competitive mode for that for Halo and games like that, Call of Duty. There's Control, another classic. There's all sorts of little offshoots on these, you know what I mean, that are like similar team objective based things, but they all allow for generally respawns or something like that. And to me, like having no respawns actually sort of like lowers the skill gap because it just means that if you lose the initial fight or something, then you have a like if so in survival you fight over the heavy, and one team wins, then they have rockets or something. That's almost like another 2 free kills in a lot of cases if they're used properly. And you're just basically giving like one team an advantage at like they win one fight and they get an advantage for that round, they win that round. It just seems kind of ridiculous to me. And then supers continue to stack, so if like a team wins like 3 or 4 rounds in a row, and they'll maybe have their supercharge and they pretty much get the next round for free because of how powerful supers are. And it's just like a really weird system to me to have into this in this type of game. You know, this type of game seems like it's built for that. You know, die, respawn, TDM slash control slash hell. I didn't even care if they threw in capture the flag in this game, but you know, something like that, not something where there's limited lives. It just seems like whenever you add limited lives in, there's more variance, right? I would say games like Counter-Strike operate with limited lives because the entire point of the game is to be a bomb plant diffuse type game. The entire game is built around that. Destiny is not built around that type of gameplay, and to just shoehorn it in all of a sudden just seems really odd to me. So yeah, not only is there no ranked playlist, but there's just like the alleged ranked playlist in this is basically just different game modes that nobody wants to play. And then there's Trials of the Nine. Oh, I forgot Trials of the Nine. Yeah, Trials of the Nine just uses the competitive playlist, and it's pretty worthless because every week it's literally the same map and the same game type over and over and over again. And for some reason, there's no matchmaking based on your amount of wins. So the goal is to go flawless, but now it's like super easy to go flawless because you could have 6 wins and get placed up against a team that has like 1 win and 2 losses or something. It's just absolutely insane to me. Uh, like how the system works, how there's not even any like sort of hint of matchmaking in systems like that. Like I've played like trials runs where I played 3 sweaty teams in a row, and then I've played trials runs where like all 7 games are just super easy. It doesn't make any sense to me, right? Like, why are you getting rewarded for this amount of randomness? It's just completely insane. So yeah, the PvP in terms of like having something to aspire towards or grind towards, it's just there's nothing there right now because there's no real way to solidify your rank in the community because uh, there's nothing that's tracking your rank aside from Destiny Tracker, and Destiny Tracker doesn't discriminate in terms of if you're playing with a stack or not. So, I mean, big deal if you have a really high KDA on Destiny Tracker or something because you're just 4 stacking all the time. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's people with like 8 or 9 KDAs I know of, and they only run stacked. So it's like this whole system is kind of like ridiculous, and there's no way to really gauge who are the best players in the game, and that's obviously frustrating for people who want to play like a ranked type game mode. And all they would need to do is just add some type of ladder or solo queue, and that would at least alleviate a lot of this problem. I mean, they'd still have a lot of problems, in my opinion. Um, they should be trying to rectify in terms of like getting private servers and stuff. I think that they're gonna do private matches in 2018 or something. So there's still be problems like that, but I just don't understand how this game has not launched with a ranked playlist. And I'm concerned that when it does launch with a ranked playlist, uh, it's going to have like really weird arbitrary rules. Like maybe the ranked playlist is only going to have the competitive ladder, or maybe you're only going to be able to enter it with a team or something. Or if you can't enter it with teams, then maybe your rank is going to be based on whoever you queue with instead of like having individual ranks per team or something like League of Legends does, where you can have like you can designate a team of 4, and then you play games and you get ranked separately versus your other team's OMR. That way you can play with your friends. You know what I mean? There's just so many problems with the PvP in this game right now that there's no competitive direction for it, and it's just really frustrating. And yeah, so there's that, and apparently they're gonna add a ranked playlist in the expansion, but or not like in this upcoming expansion, but they're planning on adding it in the future. But I just think it's sort of a bit too late. I think people are sort of burnt out already, and with no clear indication of what that playlist is going to be, like I don't understand how I can be motivated to keep playing this game for a lot longer because it's kind of like, oh, it's soon, it's coming soon, it's on the horizon. But what if it turns out that they just do a terrible job with that as well because they haven't announced any information on it? So I have no way to gauge where if I'd even like that type of system that they're going to be implementing. So just a huge problem there. We already went over game types actually when talking about the playlist because it's kind of like one and the same. And then the mouse and keyboard versus the control issue. Okay, so this is just like the ultimate stupidity in my opinion. If you're going to be playing on PC, you should just use a mouse and keyboard. If you want to use a controller, you should obviously have that option available. But why would you be given the console auto aim? It just doesn't make any sense to me in terms of balancing. There are people that are saying like it's balanced because there's advantages and disadvantages to both systems. Like I love this type of like mentality that people use all the time. See, it's actually like necessary in some games, like in StarCraft, right? Because if you don't want to homogenize all the races completely, then there needs to be differences between the races. There needs to be some system of checks and balances, so where like some units counter other units, and maybe certain strategies counter other strategies. Certain races maybe at certain points in times have advantages over other races. Like ideally, you'd probably have like sort of like a triangle system set up, but it wouldn't be like a triangle of hard counters. And there'd still be some like loose. It'd be like much more of a loose triangle, I guess you could say, or something like that. So in some games like StarCraft, that's necessary if you're going to have the races. In this game, there's absolutely no reason to do that with input methods, right? Like, why do we want? It's like, oh, well, if you're playing on a controller, your tracking aim with the auto rifles is going to be really good actually because they have like a really strong auto aim, and auto rifles have a very fast time to kill. So that's going to be the advantage if you're on a controller. But if you're on the mouse and keyboard, you're just going to have better hand cannon usage and better movement overall. So you can kind of like maybe outmaneuver the people with the auto rifles, and it's just like, why? Like, it doesn't make any sense, especially because you can't even tell what type of input your opponent is using. So if I'm playing trials and I peek into like somebody on the controller with like a Mida, they have insane auto aim on the controller, or if they're using a Zim 4, then God bless, that's even worse. You know what I mean? So, as apparently Zim 4 can be connected and works as a, like if the game detects it as a controller, so it gives, you just plug your mouse and keyboard into that, and you get the auto aim. And obviously, you get the turn rate, which sucks, but you get the mouse and keyboard control with the auto aim, which is pretty powerful. So, yeah, it's just kind of ridiculous to me how there would even be a thing or a thought. Obviously, they want, I think they want people to like rebuy the game. Essentially, it's like it's sort of weird because they come out with the game on console, like, oh, it's gonna be this great game, whatever. Oh, it's capped at 30 FPS and you have terrible tick rates and stuff like that. Oh, if you buy it on the PC, you can play with uncapped FPS. And it's like, so they want people to buy it on the console, then buy it on the PC, in order to convince people who weren't going to buy it on the PC because of the, because you have to use a mouse and keyboard. Like, oh, you can use your controller on here and still be competitive because we give you insane auto aim. It's just like ridiculous. I mean, the people trying to defend this are just like so laughable in my opinion, because it's like there's nothing to defend here. It's just kind of retarded. There's certain spots where you're going to have a clear advantage with the auto aim, and then there's going to be certain spots where you're disadvantaged. But it's not as if like you can quantify exactly how much of an advantage you're going to get for each one. You know what I mean? Like there could be a pivotal moment in the match where you decide to take a 1v1 and you lose due to the auto aim, and that's absolutely terrible. You should never have to be accounting for somebody having auto aim that's playing against you. It's just like ridiculous. It also makes certain types of weapons a lot more hard for like true mouse and keyboard players to use, because why would you use an auto rifle as a mouse and keyboard player when you can play against a console player who's going to have the same auto rifle, it's going to do the same damage and everything, but his tracking is just going to likely be better than yours because it's a lot easier for him to track with the auto aim. So it just kind of eliminates whole weapon types on the mouse and keyboard, or it changes their role. Whereas like something on the console or controller, Uriel's Gift would just be a great all-around weapon. I feel like if you're playing on the mouse and keyboard, most of the time you're going to be using that weapon to finish off kills or something. It's not really going to be your primary go-to weapon on the PC. So it just completely changes the dynamic. People don't know what to expect when they're playing. It's just awful. Like there should just be one input method, the mouse and keyboard, no auto aim. If you want to use a controller, you can, but you're forewarned that it doesn't have auto aim. Just completely ridiculous. And the sixth point is the maps. So the maps in this game are just atrocious. I don't have time in this video to go through every map, but I think probably the best map in the game might be like Javelin 4 or something. And that's not even like a great map, but it's a decent map, I guess. It's just so weird to me, a company that made great maps in other games, like Halo 1 comes to mind. And like obviously I guess a lot of time has passed, so people probably moved on in the company or something like that, but I guess there's no like precedent for map making that stood around, because these maps are just atrocious. It really just seems like what they are is they are like real world environments, or real in-game environments rather, that they drop you into PvP in, and there's not really much thought about how the map functions in a balance perspective. It's more just like how the map looks aesthetically, what cool places can we put you on to fight around as a backdrop, what cool structures we can throw in the map that just like look cool or something, and then they just like toss the power ammo in a couple odd spots, and then they're like, oh, there's your map. And I think that honestly a lot of the map choices are what kind of dictate the gun meta, and that was something that on the controller people were complaining about a lot in terms of like certain guns being overused all the time. And it really is because like these maps have, I'd say, generally speaking, very few like long lanes, and then just tons of close quarters area, right? So like stuff like auto rifles are going to be obviously highly dominant in any map like that. And when you have very few long lanes, then it sort of takes out the utility of something like a. People always complain now about scout rifles. They're like, oh, the Mida archetype is just the dominant archetype, and the like the 150 round per minute scout rifle is so bad, and part of the reason why it's so bad, I mean, they can tweak the damage values and stuff for sure, but definitely part of the reason why it's so bad is because of how like the damage fall off works in this game, and that's partly to do with the maps, because there's rarely any map in the game where your Mida is going to actually experience damage fall off, or your 200 round per minute scout rifle is going to experience damage fall off, except for maybe like the Mananin, because it has super low range if you use the first scope. But other than that, you're not really going to experience any sort of damage fall off with the 200 rounds per minute scouts. So that means that what use is having the extra range on the 150 round per minute scouts, right? The idea is theoretically they're supposed to be longer range, harder hitting, slower firing. But there's no damage fall off for the other type. So, it just makes it completely, it nullifies a whole purpose of having the range stat in those guns. So there's just some really funky things going on with a lot of the ranges on the weapons, and that definitely has in part to do with the map selection and how the maps are played in a very small, very confined space, and it's just really hard to ever get damage drop off on some of these guns. Even some of the auto rifles, like that's why you have Uriels that are out shooting Midas in some cases, because it's like you think you're a long distance on this map, but you're not really long distance. You're still in Uriel's effective range. When you're at like the farthest points, like obviously not the farthest points theoretically possible on the map, but like in the sight lines. You know what I mean? So yeah, the maps are just pretty much abysmal, and there's a lot wrong with this game right now. I think that pretty much sums up everything. This has already probably been way too long and ranty, but yeah, I'm just not very hopeful that the expansion is going to fix much. It's going to drop in a couple days, I believe Tuesday. So I'll be checking it out for a bit, but definitely going to be playing PoE for probably a long while until this stuff gets fixed, if it ever does get fixed. But yeah, that's my perspective on what's wrong with the game from a non-balanced perspective. I might do a balanced perspective video. Honestly, I feel like the game, there's definitely some imbalances, but I could live with the imbalances if the rest of the PvP was actually functional, like the core mechanics of the PvP, but just that doesn't seem to be the case. So I feel like if anything, that only makes the balance aspect even more frustrating when you're playing in a system you don't like, and then you're encountering the imbalance and stuff on top of that. It's really frustrating. So thanks for watching. Like I said, might do a PvE video about this as well, but that's it for now. Thanks for watching, guys, and talk to you later.